Hello and welcome at this Global Impact Forum with this panel, Sustainable Finance for Building a Resilient and Innovative Future. I'm Angela Antetomaso in New York, and I have the pleasure of introducing you to our wonderful guests. And the first guest, Ruth Shaber, President at Tara Health Foundation. Welcome, Ruth. Thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure to be here.
And I would also like to introduce you, Amit Pradhan, President of Silicon Valley Blockchain Society. Welcome, Amit. It's a pleasure having you here as well. So I would like to ask, first of all, our guests to introduce themselves. Ruth, can you tell me something about yourself and your past and obviously what you do now?
My pleasure. So I am an obstetrician and gynecologist. I had a career in the United States at an organization called Kaiser Permanente for almost 25 years. And in addition to being a clinician, I also had many different executive roles at Kaiser Permanente, including being director of women's health and overseeing Kaiser's population care programs, which is the way to move a very large, complex organization towards integrating research into actual clinical practice. I left my practice in 2012 and founded the Tara Health Foundation in 2014, where we do both grant making and impact investing. Tara Health invests 100% of its assets towards mission, which is very unusual for a family foundation to be doing that.
Thank you, Ruth, and congratulations. And Amit, would you like to tell me something about yourself, please?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm Amit Pradhan. I'm Chairman and CEO of Rainfall, which is a data self-sovereignty monetization platform. I'm also president and co-founder of the Silicon Valley Blockchain Society. And then I sit on a couple of boards, the Norwegian Refugee Council, which is one of the frontier refugee agencies in the world, and on the Global Mobility Council of BMW. I'm also a global leader with the BMW Foundation. My journey has been one of deep tech entrepreneurship, transitioning into investing in some of the most amazing founders that are using exponential technology to solve some of the planet's greater challenges. And for me, the journey has been one of how do I use my investment ability to create companies or influence to invest in founders and companies or projects that create a net positive impact on the humans that they intended to serve. And it ends up being a really interesting filter for how you select companies or how you select founders, how you select co-founders in ventures that you might do together, because you're looking at the world, you're looking at problems with the same lens. And in that journey, it's been really interesting to see the transition in the world of impact, because when you're trying to create a net positive impact on the humans you want to serve, you are deeply focused on impact, and the ability to do impact in a way that is both solving for the bigger challenges, but applying a lot of the lessons that you learn from startups in Silicon Valley and from investors in Silicon Valley by merging both deep exponential tech for how you can solve at scale some of the planet's biggest challenges, whether it's using cognitive AI, whether it's using decentralization with blockchain and some new token models that allow for economics to work in ways that they couldn't have worked before, or it is with the mindset of creating the next multi-billion-dollar businesses, but not just to flip out or sell to one of the big tech giants, but to genuinely solve for the bigger challenges. Because those challenges include, and this is where my work with the Norwegian Refugee Council comes into play, those challenges include solving for some of the most vulnerable in society without thinking of it as a chore or philanthropy, because with over 100 million people who are displaced today, that is still a large market of humans we can serve, and we can serve with decentralized identity, we can serve with education, we can serve with entertainment, we can certainly serve with the ideas of data self-sovereignty and creating income models for them as well. So that is really what my journey has been and what I focus on. A real pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful, Amit. Thank you. And I would like to ask actually the first question, and this is actually for both of you, because it's very important what you said, the difference between sustainable investment and impact investing. Which one is more important, and how can they positively affect financial returns? Ruth, would you like to start, please?
Sure. And I may have a slightly different definition for these terms than are conventionally used. And I think that the definitions have evolved. To me, sustainable investing means investing in companies that are sustainable. And that means not just sustainable for the enterprise itself, but also for the communities, for the environment, for the places that they operate. So there's no reason we should ever invest in companies that aren't sustainable, because that otherwise we'd be making foolish investment decisions. So sustainability is not only good for the environment, but it's also good for the company and the enterprise itself. In terms of impact investing, I also have my own definition. I think all companies, everything we invest in has impact. It's a question of what kind of impact we want. Obviously, impact investing has meant how the term is usually used is that you're investing in companies that have a double bottom line, one that is not only going to be potentially producing financial returns, but also producing some sort of impact. And I just prefer to use a much broader interpretation and making sure that whatever we invest in, that the impact it's likely to have is one that we want it to have, and that we're looking for and screening for collateral damage or other problems that any kind of enterprise can have on the communities or the planet that it's operating in.
Thank you, Ruth. And Amit, I see you nodding. I guess you agree with Ruth on this. What's your take?
I definitely see, deep agreement with, both ideas, and I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. I think, and that's essentially what Ruth is saying. I have a slightly different angle to the idea of both sustainability as well as impact. In the past, the conversation of impact has been tailored to be defined as something that is designed to only invest in companies that create a positive impact on communities or the planet at large. And it was often at the detriment to how sustainable that company could be in terms of its life cycle and what it was intended to achieve. And more often than not, you end up seeing investments into companies that feel more like they are not-for-profits because of their mission, because of their purpose. And as much as that sometimes is a wonderful construct and structure, at the end of the day, if you really think about sustainable impact investments, those are investments that will create the most effective net positive return over a longer period of time. And to create an overall net positive return, you need not only to achieve quantitative return on the impact that you're trying to achieve, you need to also achieve a qualitative return. And at the end of the day, you need to have a broader perspective of who the stakeholders are when you think about the eventual financial return. Because the financial return is a very important part of sustainable impact investing, because you want that impact to continue, not just be limited to its initial intent. And the most financially sustainable impact startups will achieve effectively the greatest impact. Over time, though, we're going to have to think about what that definition of impact is, because that starts to pigeonhole companies into being able to use the narrative or the definition, but not truly achieve their long-term sustainable purpose as an impact startup. And to me, the marriage of what you would expect from a Silicon Valley startup in terms of its return profile, combined with startups that are solving for some of the world's greatest challenges, are going to be those sustainable impact startups. And those are the ones that, quite frankly, I am deeply interested in. So they're the ones who are leveraging the greatest exponential technology on one hand, using expansive mindsets for growth and what they can achieve, but doing it in a sustainable way without causing harm to the overall community, environment, planet around them. And those will be the most successful investments that we collectively make.
Thank you, Amit. And at this point, the easy question is, what is the right balance between purpose and profit? Ruth, Can you tell me what you think about this?
Well, I think that just like any intelligent management of a portfolio, every organization, every asset allocator needs to decide what the right balance is. And just like a wealth advisor would tell you to consider what's your risk needs, how are you older and you're really looking for using your capital, or are you preserving your capital? Or are you trying to grow your capital? And I think that this notion of impact needs to be another variable that we take into account when we're planning our portfolios. In my case, I would never consider an investment that didn't also have a thorough analysis of the impact it's likely to have. But others who are interested in more aggressive growth, who don't have that luxury of looking at impact more thoroughly, may need to compromise on impact and really purely look at financial returns.
Thank you, Ruth. Amit, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's if you drop it on a timeline, then you can actually get both to the same place over time, right? When you just think of it without a timeline, right, then it's, pick purpose or pick profit. But if you can put on, a 10-year lens, the reality is that the companies that end up having the best net positive impact on the communities that they serve rather than target, the ones that create that net positive impact also have the most loyalty, have the most stickiness. And when you think about lifetime value, none of this has to be done for free, right? People will pay for the best possible product that they feel creates that net positive impact on them, right? And so, yes, in the short term, as we go through this transition of the conversation of purpose, the conversation of what profit really means, what is too much profit, what is the right amount of profit, that's where, going back to what Ruth was saying earlier, thinking about sustainable profit. It just means that you cannot design companies that are so extractive when they can be, that the people that they intended to serve end up having a negative relationship with them. And there are multiple examples of the kind of companies that have retained incredible loyalty because of what they stand for and because of what they invest in. And I would say Salesforce is a good example of a company like that. There's many who would argue that Salesforce is not the best CRM product there is. And yet, because of what the company stands for and what the company's founder and CEO will always stand for, there are a lot of people who will stay with companies like that. And I think more and more we're starting to see, even with the big asset managers on the retail side as well, that as there's a generational change starting to happen, there's a lot of younger people who are investing their money, require their fund managers, their investment managers, their wealth managers to focus on companies that have really high scores when it comes to ESG, when it comes to impact, when it comes to sustainability in general, whatever the term is that is being used right now. And I think that that's a really powerful transition that's starting to happen. And I just, like I said earlier, I love to put it on a timeline because it starts to make it a lot more palatable for people to understand.
So what is the way for the private sector to invest this way? If we consider all the global challenges we have at the moment, we're not talking only about climate challenges, but also about poverty, and about the many challenges we have had in the past few years and we see around us now. Ruth?
Yes, and I think this builds really well on what Amit was saying about a timeline and the integration of sustainability and impact and financial returns. I recently co-authored a book called The XX Edge, Unlocking Higher Returns and Lower Risk. And our central thesis is that when women are centered in financial decision-making, that returns are higher across all asset classes. So whether we're talking about public companies, funds, entrepreneurs, real estate, debt holders, that that gender diversity, when women have equal representation in the financial decision making, that returns are higher. And this is because women bring to the table a different lived experience. They tend to be more collaborative. They tend to be more risk aware, which doesn't mean they're not willing to take risks, but they assess risk differently than men in general. And women tend to be more interested in the long-term outcomes, just like Amit is saying around the timeline, that women inherently tend to be less willing to give up short-term gains for long-term rewards. And women also tend to be closer to the problems that we're trying to solve, whether it's around climate or the care economy or poverty alleviation, food insecurity, that we know that women are the ones at the front line, whether as consumers or managing small subsistence farms or making healthcare decisions for their families. That when you bring people to the table who are the most familiar with the needs for innovation, that you're going to get better outcomes. So, in terms of the best way for the private sector to think about sustainability and impact, the easy solution is just make sure that there are women at the table sharing in these financial decision making.
That's definitely interesting, actually, Ruth, and also about your book. If I can ask you one more question. At this point, since women are excellent decision makers when it comes to, finance and business, how can we have more gender equality in finance? How can we really get there?
Well, I think it requires some intention, and really speaking to the 97% of asset allocators that are men in the world, that it takes some intention to recognize the value that women bring to the table and to intentionally recruit, intentionally invest. Whether you're a venture capitalist and you're looking at new entrepreneurs, think about, are there women on the leadership team? If you're looking for a new mutual fund, look to see who the GPs are, or the fund managers. So there's lots of opportunity to intentionally make sure that you have gender diversity. And I just want to be clear that this is not about men versus women. This is about gender diverse teams versus male only teams. And another important thing about this approach is that it's not a zero-sum game. So it's not a question of switching out men for women. It really is about making the room bigger, making the table bigger, because we know from really great evidence that when you use a more diverse team, that you actually grow the economic pie, that it leads to economic growth, and everyone benefits.
Thank you, Ruth. And this is very interesting also because I would like to ask Amit, actually, if I might, what is your experience of also this gender, diversity as a president, in a Silicon Valley, of a big company in the Silicon Valley?
I have to say, I could not agree with Ruth more, right? It's the message that we try and get out is that this isn't a zero-sum game. By having more diversity, you don't lose, you win. And so it's much better for men to have more women involved in leadership roles, because returns in general are going to be greater for your organization, for your communities, and in turn for the planet in general. So it's really about, everyone winning. I also would add that, it's not just about representation. That is the end goal, and that's what we achieve. But getting there is about access. And I think, to the point, Ruth, that you made as well about 97% of fund allocators, fund managers being men, it's not because they can do a better job or they're better educated or smarter. Absolutely not, right? It's about the access points at various stages that allowed them to get to where they are. And more than just ensuring that we have an equal number of women to number of men, what we should be doing is making sure there's equal amount of access available to women. And that is something that, like you asked in your question, how do we do this in a place like Silicon Valley, which has been so male dominated. It's about giving that access, showing what that access means, making sure that access can come without strings attached, making sure that it is comfortable. It is a happy place for women and other diversity to be part of. Because once you do that, you not only create the better outcomes, you also create the better experience. And if we're not all living for the better experiences, then I think we're missing out on what we truly should be living for.
I mean, that's such a good point, because I think that there's so many examples of when let's say you're trying to recruit more women to your company, because you believe in what we're talking about in the book, the XX Edge, that more diversity is going to make your company stronger. Well, if you're going to want to recruit, then you're going to need to have a much more comprehensive benefits policy. You're going to need to think about, well, what's our paid leave policy? What's our healthcare access policy? And how about flexible working hours? And those things, maybe they'll help you strengthen your female workforce, but they're also going to be great changes for all of your workforce, so that you make your company better all around, not just for the women who you want to recruit, but for all the people who are already working there as well. So it's not a zero-sum game, that it raises the tide for all boats.
And if I may add, Angela, just one quick point to that, it also feeds in really well to the idea of, I always say when it comes to investments, we've passed through sustainable impact. Sustainable impact is one thing. When you think about investors, they often, respond to or follow trends. When you think about, really, really good, great investors, they are able to detect trends early. But actually, the best investors in the world, and they're very few, they're not looking for trends or following them. They read the socio-cultural tea leaves of society, right? You can think of it as zeitgeist. And when you read that, you see what is going to generate the trends that people will invest in, and later on other investors will follow. And it is very hard to argue right now, if anyone is keeping their eyes and ears open, that the socio-cultural tea leaves are suggesting gender equality, are suggesting generational change in terms of how capital is transferring from multiple generations into a generation that believes in equality, that believes in access, that believes in empowerment. And if you are going to be a great investor, you should be reading those social cultural tea leaves. And those tea leaves are suggesting that if we don't invest in, encourage, and create an ecosystem of access for women, for people of color, to gain expertise, to showcase that expertise, and then generate wealth, not just for themselves, but for the community at large, then you're going to miss out on the greatest financial opportunity that we are going to see for the next 2 decades. So the question becomes, where do you want to play? Feel free to follow, and you'll, if you're lucky, make some returns, or feel free to read those social-cultural tea leaves.
I love that. Get in front of it.
Yes,
Thank you.
This is all very inspirational, actually, and great and wonderful. I will stick on this topic, actually, about gender diversity in impact investing. To be honest, because it's really it's a very hot topic, and as we say, obviously, it's so inspirational what we say. So thank you, Amit, also for your point of view on this. And since you build, again, Silicon Valley, so building deep technology societies, where do you see that all of this impact investing in this, technology sector, just the most advanced technology sector? And also if we can say something about, again, gender diversity, how important it is, but mostly impact investing, Silicon Valley, blockchain, what is the core of this?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. If you think about transformative technologies of our time, the internet, you could argue, started this journey, and it brought with it incredible opportunity. Our lives depend upon the foundation that is the internet today. And yet it brought with it, a lot of negative aspects as well. And we're seeing those play out over time. If you look at AI as the other shift, AI has brought with it incredible ability. The things that we can do because of AI when it comes to drug discovery, when it comes to treatments, when it comes to financial empowerment is incredible. And yet at the same time, as someone who has a background in cognitive AI, I would be the first to admit that AI is just as great for empowerment as it is for weaponization. But when you look at decentralization and the blockchain, it's very hard to find examples where you can by intent use the blockchain to create harm, right? By its architectural construct and its philosophical underpinnings, it's designed exceedingly well to solve some of the larger challenges we have, including the challenges of inequality. And I think that the sooner we see the shift, and we're starting to see that in Silicon Valley as well, not because Silicon Valley is waking up and is doing this, it's because we're starting to see this come from all around the world. We're starting to see founders and startups use decentralization combined with the underpinnings of cognitive AI, for example, or simple machine learning, and the data that's being generated, for example, from the IoT devices, 50 billion connected devices in the world, and starting to see how they can solve for the bigger challenges, because many of them are also starting to recognize that the biggest returns are not going to come from the next automated Snapchat filter app that you're going to hope that Facebook buys, which has been kind of the rinse and repeat formula of Silicon Valley, to being the larger formula, some of the successes that people like Elon Musk have had, his personality aside, that's not the point, that they've had in terms of influencing other car companies to start going electric because of the success of Tesla, I think has influenced not just what startups build and the audacity of what they build for, but also what investors are starting to recognize as areas that they should start focusing on, if not their entire theses, at least to open their eyes and to start making allocations there. And, for example, we have, a pension fund that is part of the Silicon Valley Blockchain Society that has made a 3% allocation of their AUM to digital assets and blockchain. Now, that might seem small as a percentage, but when you start looking at billions of dollars of capital, it starts to unlock incredible opportunities. And suddenly that audacity of, what we can solve for doesn't feel as outrageous anymore. So I certainly take an optimistic view, recognizing that the path is not linear, and we're going to see all of these bumps along the way. But in general, when you look at what really high quality founders are starting to build for, it is far more encouraging than it is discouraging.
Ruth, what is your take on this? Yes, sorry if I interrupt.
That's
Ruth,
fine.
go ahead.
I'm sorry I interrupted. I just want to, really agree with. But I want to build on what you had also said earlier about what are companies designing? Who are they designing for? And the notion of stakeholders. And I think we all know that there is the risk of harm. And as a physician, I've certainly seen the impact of very well-intending companies and new technologies that have unintended consequences. And so this is, in fact, one more argument for diversity at the table. As new technologies are being deployed that have the opportunity to disrupt and really transform the way we live our lives, we need to make sure there's folks at the table who are helping to protect against any potential harm and weaponization that can result. So it's just one more reason to have a diverse team.
Yes, and from here, actually, my question I wanted just to ask you, Ruth, AI, responsible AI and diversity, and, what prompted you to write this book? And obviously, I am sure that this was a big topic in your book, or at least your decision to write it.
Well, absolutely. And certainly my background in women's health and understanding the power of when women are at the center of decision-making, not just in healthcare, but across all industries, influenced my decision, but also my experience at Tara Health Foundation, where we have an endowment that's invested 100% for our mission of improving the lives of women and girls. And when we started out on that journey almost 10 years ago, we were advised that we would have to compromise on our returns if we were going to be 100% mission aligned. And in fact, not only is that not true, that we've had to compromise, that our portfolio outperforms the market year over year, and it's led by two female bankers. And so it was the power of women as centralized financial decision makers across our entire portfolio that really drove me to write this book, because I think the evidence now is clear. And it's not just in terms of financial decision making, it's also understanding the market risks of not including women, whether it's because you're designing products and you're missing out on half of the consumer population, or you're making mistakes by designing products that don't take into account the differences in genders. So there's lots of reasons why we wrote the book.
Thank you, Ruth. And now we have just a few minutes left. I would like to ask both of you, what's next? Amit, can you tell me what's next now when it comes to impact investing? Again, AI, all the new technologies and everything, considering obviously what is sustainable investing, and not only just investing to have financial returns, obviously.
Yeah, and I would say, it's part of that timeline journey, right? Whenever I've talked with my fellow impact investors about, what ails the quantum of impact investing, it always comes down to, it's a small in the corner subset of mainstream venture capital, as an example, right? And there's a huge gap between the amount of money deployed into impact startups every year compared to those deployed into, your typical exponential tech startups. And the conversation tends to be, oh my God, there's a money gap. There's a giant money gap. And for me, the answer has always been, hold on a second. It's not just the money gap that might be the end result. When you talk to the average impact startup, impact founder, they're not using the latest in exponential tech. They're not thinking about building the $10 billion company. They're not thinking about processes that, a typical Silicon Valley, and I say Silicon Valley as a mindset, not a location, startup will be able to deploy. And once you start changing those aspects, you start creating companies that look very similar to the companies that have had tremendous financial success in the past, but are now focused on solving for bigger challenges that do impact people's lives in a net positive way, where you can look at it qualitatively and quantitatively. And to Ruth's point earlier, you can look at the unintended consequences of technology or unintended consequences of that startup's purpose, and be able to analyze that in terms of its true life cycle and its true life cycle of return. And it is amazing how foreign this conversation sounded when I was making these points about 5 years ago. And now there are multiple rooms where I sound like everyone else. And that is the best possible thing. And the most perfect outcome is when, everyone has kind of a viewpoint like that. And, people like Ruth and I don't have to talk about this anyways, because, how do we matter, right? It doesn't matter at all. And so I remain very optimistic about the trajectory. And like I said earlier, it just won't be linear.
Ruth, I see you smiling and nodding.
Yeah,
I guess you agree with Amit.
I do. And the ultimate sign of success is when we work ourselves out of a job, right? Because everybody else is saying the same thing. And I completely agree. And I would add that when there's no longer a field of impact investing, that we recognize it as just the mainstream investment strategies need to always consider impact if you're going to be an effective financial analyst. And I would add, though, that one thing we haven't talked about so much today is measurement. And how do we actually measure impact? There are thousands of tools that financial engineers use to measure their financial decision making, and we need to weave impact into that toolbox. And it's important, and going back to Amit, what you said right off the bat, is we need to make sure that the communities and the people that we hope to be benefiting with our impact actually are at the table when we design our measurement strategies.
Thank you so much to both of you for this wonderful panel, this wonderful conversation, very inspirational conversation, and I'm glad so many topics actually came out in our in our time, let's say short time in a way, right? But thank you so much to Ruth Shaber, President of Tara Health Foundation. Thank you, Amit Pradhan, President of Silicon Valley Blockchain Society, and obviously thank you all for following this Global Impact Webit Global Impact Forum and the panel. Sustainable finance for building a resilient and innovative future. We also talked about the gender diversity and so many other things. So thank you all for being with us. I'm Angela Tetommaso in New York.